helping your plants participate in the photosynthesis process and gives you everything else. And added to that, of course, is farmers' knowledge and farmers' work. So what's happening to the farmer in this system where what the earth could produce internally through ecological processes of soil fertility renewal, biodiversity renewal, water conservation, you're having to buy every bit of it. And the most important and significant cost now is cost of seed. Why cost of seed? Because in the 1980s, the old chemical companies said we aren't making enough profit. Got to make more profit. And they decided that they would first merge, they would become bigger, and they talked about 5 companies surviving into the future. I was at a meeting in 1987 where they were saying all this in Geneva. And they must use genetically modified organisms, which they didn't create. University labs had done the work on DNA splicing. They picked up those tools and said, if we do genetic engineering, we can now pretend that we are inventing the seed. And we can now own it as our intellectual property through patent rights. They even said at this 87 meeting, and we got to have a global treaty to enforce this on the world. That's the day I decided I was going to save seeds. And I took inspiration from Gandhi's spinning wheel. I said, then too we were governed by a huge empire. And Gandhi pulled out a spinning wheel and said, we will fight imperialism through the non-violent power of empowered citizens. And when he was told, but the spinning wheel is too small, he said, it's because it's small, it's in the hands of every person. No one is too poor to participate in the independence movement. And that's how he turned it into such an amazing mass movement that the whole country rose. And I said, today's spinning wheel is the seed. And I started Navdanya. And of course, I had to learn a lot about it. So seed today is the foundation of all freedoms, of all the beings, the pollinators, without whom we wouldn't have 50% of the food. They're now calculating in the UN that contribution of pollinators, $169 billion annually. And yet the pesticides we're using and the genetically modified crops we are using are killing the pollinator. In certain parts, 75% bees are gone. The monarch butterfly, which travels all the way through the Americas and then goes and nests in Mexico, 75% of monarch butterflies are gone. And they all have amazing functions, not just in the food system, but in the ecological system. In our own case, the only genetically modified crop that has been introduced is BT cotton. In '98, Monsanto put out huge ads how next year Indian farmers would be using Bolgard, which is the trade name of BT cotton. And since I mentioned from 87 onwards I was working on this, the minute I saw that ad, I rang up our Ministry of Environment and said, did you give them approval? And they said, we don't know what's Monsanto. We don't know what's BT cotton. No one's come to us. So I took the government as well as Monsanto to court in the Supreme Court of India. And they couldn't sell at that time. They managed, of course, to lubricate the system, which is not very difficult. And from 98 to today, we have a very long experience. 95% of the cotton seeds of this country, from where cotton evolved, is now owned by Monsanto. Most Indian seed companies have to sign a licensing arrangement with them. And they can only sell Monsanto seeds. So the royalty goes back to St. Louis. And when the Parliament, in the Agriculture, Standing Committee on Agriculture was doing this long study on what had happened with genetic engineering, a Monsanto representative said, yes, we collect half the price of seed as royalty. Of course, for me, this issue of royalty collection on seed is morally outrageous. Because if all beings are sentient beings, then how can you start to say they are my inventions? Sometimes I joke and say GMO, which is how genetically engineered organisms are referred to. I said a good way to remember what a GMO is a message saying, God, move over. Because we are now the creators, and we'll collect the rents from the farmers with every season. And one of the things that they had said in that 1987 meeting is, every farmer everywhere for every season will be buying seed from us. And they said in 2000, in the year 2000. Most farmers aren't buying their seeds. In India, so far, there's only BT cotton. It's not that they've given up. No, Jairam Ramesh, as our environment minister, was removed because he followed the law and held public hearings on BT Bengan. Jayanti Natarajan was removed because she followed the law and refused to sign on an affidavit saying everything's fine. Mysteriously, the first time I've heard about indefinite postponement of cases is on the GMO case that's being heard. On Tuesday, the date was coming up, and it's been postponed indefinitely. Because the courts, as you know, are in fact holding this country together. And the judges said, we don't understand this issue, it's too complicated. So we're going to appoint a technical expert committee, and they picked the top institutions of India related to biosafety, toxicology, molecular biology, cellular biology, pulled it all together and appointed a technical expert committee to give them advice. And the technical expert committee has put in its report. The report is clear. Our scientific assessment systems aren't in place. The company tells you it's safe. The government doesn't assess anything. So we must have independent assessment. In the case of BT, we must put a moratorium for 10 years. In the case of the only other application, which is herbicide-tolerant seeds, says a country like India can't afford this because every little blade of grass is used. Half our food in villages comes from uncultivated